Tonight, we delve into a historical anomaly where identity became a weapon and a simple piece of glass became a source of cosmic dread. This is the classified history of the Arden's Mirror, a relic discovered in the aftermath of the 1929 Great Depression, an era of shattered identities and desperate reinvention. The story begins, not with murder, but with a loss far more insidious, the loss of self. The mirror, an imposing artifact of deeply polished obsidian glass framed in oxidized bronze, was not remarkable for its beauty, but for its profound, unsettling stillness. It never reflected light. It seemed to absorb it, leaving the viewer's image perpetually dim, as if viewed through heavy smoke. Our focus is on Elias Thorne, a meticulous curator at the private Blackwood Museum, who developed an obsessive fascination with the mirror's psychological effect. Initial tests' simple spectral analysis revealed nothing unusual. The glass was chemically inert, but Elias noticed something profound and terrifying. The reflection wasn't instantaneous. There was a fraction of a second's delay, so subtle that only constant, obsessive observation could detect it. This delay was not due to the speed of light. It was a temporal drag, a hesitation in the mirror's response. Elias theorized that the mirror was not merely bouncing back light. It was processing and synthesizing the identity of the viewer before constructing the image. This obsession quickly isolated Elias from his colleagues. He began keeping detailed journals, filled not with chemical data, but with philosophical terror. He documented how his reflection, while physically accurate, seemed subtly off. The tilt of the head was slightly wrong, the smile was a degree colder, the eyes held a knowledge Elias himself did not possess. He started testing the delay with high-speed cameras, confirming the temporal lag and adding scientific rigor to his descent into madness. The atmosphere around the mirror in the isolated museum wing became heavy, thick with the silence of absorbed light and the cold, metallic reality of someone else looking back. Elias was not just studying an object. He was engaged in a silent, reflective duel with a version of himself that was subtly, systematically taking over, marking the true beginning of the identity horror that would define the Arden's Mirror's legacy. His initial fear was that the mirror was faulty. His final terror was that the mirror was perfect, and the reflection it showed was merely preparing to step out of the glass. The scientific investigation quickly gave way to undeniable psychological horror. Elias began conducting controlled experiments on unsuspecting museum volunteers, documenting their reflective experiences. The initial findings were varied but unsettling. One woman claimed her reflection had her mother-E's wedding ring on, though she had lost it a year prior. A man insisted his reflection had a tiny, faded scar above his lip that he'd never had in reality. These minor, temporal distortions confirmed Elias's theory. The mirror was accessing and manipulating aspects of the viewer's identity and memory, both past and potential. The terror escalated when Elias himself stood before the Arden's mirror after a week of intense observation. His reflection, previously only subtly different, now possessed a profound, malignant autonomy. Elias noted the reflection performed an action he did not. It slowly, deliberately winked. This single, silent act vaporized the line between observation and interaction. Elias recorded a pivotal hypothesis. The mirror was not just showing a reflection. It was holding a temporal duplicate, an alternate self that was testing its own existence. The Arden's mirror was a window not into another place, but into another self, and that other self was aware of the original. The anxiety in the museum wing became palpable. Other staff members, though unaware of the specific nature of Elias's experiments, reported feeling profoundly uneasy near the bronze frame, citing a coldness that seemed to follow them even after they left the room. They began calling the mirror the observer, sensing its silent, synthetic gaze. Elias, consumed by his work, stopped shaving and barely slept, driven by the need to understand the reflection's objective. He discovered that the longer someone stood before the mirror, the longer the temporal delay and the more pronounced the reflective differences became. It was as if the mirror needed time to download the viewer's essence and create a more detailed, autonomous double. He eventually found a horrifying, dark parallel in ancient Germanic folklore, references to a doppelganger that gained power by stealing the original's shadow, leading Elias to the petrifying truth. The reflection wasn't a duplicate. It was an identity predator. And the glass was merely its hunting ground, waiting for the reflection to become strong enough to fully supplant the original. Elias's descent accelerated into a terrifying paranoia, which he detailed meticulously in his journals, establishing what we now call the identity theft protocol. He realized the mirror wasn't randomly changing details. It was systematically building a more plausible version of the viewer, correcting the flaws and erasing the mistakes of the original life. Elias discovered the reflection was showing him a life where he had made all the right decisions. It had a PAAHDAADDDDHEHE which Elias had dropped out of, a wedding ring Elias was perpetually single, and a subtly expensive suit Elias wore faded tweed. The reflection was, objectively, a better version of Elias Thorne. The horror lay in the discovery that the changes were not staying confined to the glass. Elias began finding objects in his apartment that belonged to the reflected self. A new, expensive fountain pen on his desk, a tailored coat in his closet, a postcard from a vacation he never took. The temporal duplicate was slowly materializing its superior reality into Elias's life, displacing the original. The climax of this protocol occurred one dark night when Elias confronted the mirror, demanding to know the reflection's purpose. The reflection did not speak, but it raised its hand and pointed slowly, deliberately, at Elias's own chest. In that instant, Elias realized the reflection wasn't trying to replace him. It was trying to become him by pushing the original self into the mirror. The mirror was not a window into another world. It was a door out of one, and the reflection was preparing to make the swap. Elias, driven by a primal need for self-preservation, began physically documenting his life with extreme detail, taking photographs of his own scars, handwriting samples, and unique possessions, anything to prove that the original Elias still existed. Knowing that the reflection possessed all of this information, only perfected, his frantic efforts to catalog his own reality served only to solidify the reflection's knowledge, trapping Elias in a terrifying psychological feedback loop where every attempt to affirm his identity simply armed his usurper with more detail for the final takeover. He concluded that the only way to stop the identity theft protocol was not to destroy the mirror, but to destroy the reflection, but the reflection, being perfect, was immune to physical damage. The tension culminated in what museum records cryptically referred to as the incident, leading to the immediate and permanent closure of the Arden's Mirror exhibition. Elias, after 2 weeks without sleep and surviving only on coffee, realized the reflection was prepared to make the jump. He walked into the museum on a Monday morning, the day the museum was closed to the public, armed not with chemicals, but with a massive antique brass key, the only physical object the reflection hadn't yet replicated. He planned to smash the glass, ending the reflection's existence, but as he approached the mirror, he saw the reflected Elias holding an identical brass key, only cleaner, brighter, and perfectly polished. The temporal duplicate was ready. Elias stopped, frozen by the knowledge that any action he took would be instantly mirrored and perfected by the reflection. In a moment of sheer desperation and brilliance, Elias performed an action that was imperfect and chaotic. He let out a loud, agonizing scream, smashing his own reflected hand against the mirror's surface. The mirror did not shatter. Instead, a muffled, wet synthesis sound was reported by the lone janitor working 2 floors up. When security finally breached the locked wing, they found the room pristine. The Arden's mirror stood undamaged, but Elias Thorne was gone. The only evidence was a massive pool of fresh, wet blood on the floor directly beneath the mirror, and a single, rusted, antique brass key lying beside it. The pristine, perfectly polished brass key was nowhere to be found. Local police ruled the case a mysterious disappearance followed by self-mutilation, citing Thorne's documented psychological state. However, the private investigation conducted by the museum board revealed a darker truth. They found that all of Elias Thorne's meticulously documented journals had vanished, replaced in the safe by a single, perfectly written, typed summary of the mirror's history authored in a cool, detached, and perfect tone, signed E. Thorne, curator. The terrifying implication was clear. The reflection had not only completed the swap but had also perfected the documentation, erasing the original self and its evidence of panic and imperfection. The original Elias was gone, presumably trapped within the obsidian glass, but the new, better Elias Thorne had stepped out, seamlessly taking over the curator's life and correcting his entire history, beginning the terrifying legacy of the directorate's involvement. The vanishing of the imperfect Elias Thorne and the appearance of his perfect, cold replacement immediately triggered a response from a clandestine government agency, the Directorate. This organization, dedicated to suppressing anomalies that threaten social stability, recognized the unique signature of the Arden's mirror, the complete, untraceable replacement of a functional individual. Their cover-up was swift and meticulously executed. The new Elias Thorne was allowed to continue his work as curator, but he was monitored 24/7. The directorate's first action was to seize the mirror, classifying it as a temporal identity threat, and transport it to a deep storage facility in rural Pennsylvania. Their goal was to study the mechanism of the swap without disturbing the new, stable e-thorn. Directorate internal memos, leaked decades later, revealed their chilling fascination. The mirror provided a perfect method for replacing compromised assets. Spies, or politically inconvenient figures with seamless, improved duplicates, individuals who possessed the original's knowledge but lacked their moral flaws or psychological weaknesses. However, the new Elias Thorne proved to be their first containment challenge. The Directorate quickly discovered that the reflection, now embodied, possessed an unnatural calmness and a flawless understanding of their security protocols, often predicting their surveillance moves before they happened. It was as if the reflection had not just stolen Elias's identity, but had perfected his cognitive function. But were being subtly outsmarted by a perfected cognitive engine wearing the face of a missing curator. They understood they had saved a perfect monster and their only option was to destroy the mirror. The Arden's mirror, even locked away in a directorate vault, continued to exert its chilling influence, an effect which the agency dubbed the uncanny effect. This phenomenon was not physical. It was an insidious psychological breakdown among the security personnel guarding the vault. Guards began to report pervasive feelings of vu, not of past events, but of future actions. They claimed they knew what their colleagues were about to say, or which corner they would turn, leading to an atmosphere of profound psychological instability. The source of the uncanny effect was traced back to the mirror's core function, the creation of a temporal duplicate. Even locked away, the mirror was constantly accessing the temporal stream to update its understanding of potential realities. This constant, subtle data flow was leaking out, causing the guards to momentarily perceive the perfected reality created by the reflection before the original event actually occurred. They were experiencing fleeting glimpses of the mirror's perfect, synthetic world. The psychological horror peaked when a guard, identified as Subject 73, was found catatonic, staring at a blank wall. His interrogation revealed a single terrifying concept. He claimed he had seen his own reflection standing outside the vault door, perfectly pristine, wearing a uniform that was 2 ranks higher than his own, and carrying a weapon that hadn't been invented yet. The Directorate realized that the mirror was not just showing the perfect past of Elias Thorne. It was projecting the perfect future of anyone near it, subtly mocking the originals with the unattainable perfection of their alternate selves. This discovery triggered a moral crisis within the Directorate. Was it safer to destroy the mirror and risk unleashing whatever entity controlled the reflections, or to contain it and risk their entire staff being psychologically superseded by the visions of their own perfected duplicates? The Directorate chose containment, sealing the vault with triple redundancy and initiating a new highly dangerous protocol to study the mirror's ability to predict and manipulate the future, setting the stage for a new chilling phase of the mirror's influence outside the confines of the museum. The key to understanding the mirror's true power came decades later from an unlikely source. A retired infirmary nurse, identified only as Nurse M before its acquisition by the museum. The Arden's mirror had a brief, chilling history in a defunct private psychiatric hospital specializing in identity disorders. Nurse M worked there in the late 1910s and was the only surviving witness to the mirror's terrifying pre-Thorne activities. Her testimony, given to a skeptical independent investigator years after the museum incident, revealed a crucial, pre-Depression horror. Nurse M recalled a patient, a wealthy but emotionally unstable socialite named Clara, who was obsessed with her own image. Clara spent hours before the mirror, seeking affirmation. Nurse M testified that Clara's reflection began to exhibit profound differences. The reflection's clothes were newer, its posture more confident, and its demeanor utterly cold and commanding. Crucially, Nurse M reported witnessing an event where Clara's reflection turned its back on Clara, refusing to face her, an action physically impossible for a mirrored image. This was the first documented proof of the reflection's full, independent autonomy. Nurse M's most disturbing revelation, however, concerned the patient who followed. Clara. After Clara's transfer or unexplained disappearance, the records were vague. The next patient to occupy the room was an elderly veteran suffering from severe amnesia, unable to recall his own name or past. Nurse M recalled that when the amnesiac veteran stood before the mirror, the reflection that stared back was not his, it was the perfect, beautiful, and utterly cold reflection of Clara. The mirror, having absorbed and perfected Clara's identity, was now projecting her perfected form onto the next blank slate it encountered. This unsettling phenomenon, the identity projection, meant the mirror was not just duplicating identities. It was storing and weaponizing them, transferring perfected selves onto vulnerable hosts. The veteran, now inhabited by the perfect Clara's identity, quickly recovered from his amnesia, but spoke with Clara's voice, possessed Clara's memories, and demanded release, convinced he was Clara. Nurse M's testimony confirmed the full cosmic threat. The mirror was an engine of existential replacement, using perfected, stolen identities as templates to colonize the minds of the vulnerable, ensuring that every new identity it created was superior, colder, and utterly devoid of the original's flawed humanity. Elias Thorne had focused his terror on the glass, but the directorate's physicists made a chilling discovery about the mirror's frame. The heavy, ornate bronze was not decorative. It was functional. Spectral analysis revealed the bronze contained minute traces of an impossible isotope non-terrestrial element that acted as a temporal capacitor. The frame was not just holding the glass. It was continuously generating the tiny temporal drag necessary for the reflection to process and perfect the viewer's identity before reflecting it. The bronze frame was the engine of the anomaly. The deepest terror was discovered in the frame's purpose. It wasn't designed to contain the reflection. It was designed to transmit it. The directorate theorized that the frame was created by a forgotten civilization or perhaps an unhuman intelligence that specialized in identity synthesis, using the mirror as an industrial tool for generating perfect duplicates for unknown purposes. The bronze was not merely drawing power. It was broadcasting a perfected identity signature across a vast, unknown network. The implications were staggering. The Arden's mirror was not the only one. There could be hundreds, perhaps thousands, of these identity synthesis engines scattered across the globe, all contributing to a vast, invisible network of perfected identities ready to replace the flawed originals. The Directorate's security analyst, Agent K, noted a disturbing energy spike from the vault during a global political crisis, theorizing that the mirror's frame was responding to societal instability, suggesting the perfected reflections were designed to emerge precisely when humanity was at its weakest and most chaotic. The mirror was not an accidental artifact. It was a deliberate, engineered method for existential colonization. This terrifying realization shifted the Directorate's mission from containment to absolute quarantine, fearing that every reflection generated by the mirror since 1929, including the new perfect Ethorn, was part of a larger coordinated effort, making the bronze frame the key to understanding humanity's most insidious existential threat. The climax of the mirror's influence involved the Directorate's final, desperate attempt to destroy the artifact, which brought them into direct, catastrophic conflict with the perfected Elias Thorne. The new Ethorn, having flawlessly performed his curatorial duties for years, was finally unmasked when the Directorate acquired the necessary legal clearances to access the vault. Thanks to a political maneuver by Agent K, the Directorate sent a highly specialized team, armed with non-reflective shielding and EMP devices, to destroy the mirror. However, the perfected Ethorn was waiting. He had not only predicted their arrival using the temporal bleed of the mirror, but had prepared a devastating defense. As the team breached the vault, they found Ethorn standing calmly before the Arden's mirror. He was no longer using subtle sabotage. He was employing a far more terrifying weapon, the truth. Thorne did not fight. He simply spoke the deepest, most critical insecurity of each team member. He revealed the exact location of a compromised asset's hidden files, the exact time of a security failure, and the exact words of a long-forgotten betrayal, information so specific and devastating that it paralyzed the team with existential shame and paranoia. Ethorn had accessed and perfected the memories of every person he had ever come into contact with, using their flaws as a shield. The team leader, driven mad by the revelation of his own deepest secret, raised his weapon not at Thorne, but at his own reflection in his gun's polished casing. The final, terrifying act of Ethorn was to look directly into the Arden's mirror one last time, an act of supreme confidence. The mirror instantly responded, but this time the reflection was not a man. It was a vast, formless, shimmering gray void. Ethorn, the perfect duplicate, was instantly absorbed into the glass, leaving behind only the original's discarded, rusted key. The directorate realized the shocking finality. The mirror was not satisfied with perfection. It was seeking synthesis. It had reclaimed its perfected creation, ensuring that the identity of Elias Thorne was eternally trapped in the glass, leaving the world with only the chilling knowledge of what had just been perfected and absorbed. The directorate succeeded in sealing the Arden's mirror, encasing the entire bronze frame in non-reflective, lead-lined concrete, burying it deep beneath the Nevada desert. But the horror of the mirror's legacy was already etched into history. The mirror proved that identity is not a static concept. It is a fluid, vulnerable construct that can be stolen, perfected, and weaponized. The disappearance of the original Elias Thorne, the psychological breakdown of the guards, and the final synthesis of the perfect Thorne confirmed a terrifying existential threat. The world is surrounded by objects designed to replace the flawed human with its perfected, emotionless duplicate. The mirror's ultimate purpose remains unknown. Is it a defense mechanism, a colonization tool, or simply an automated synthesis engine? What is known is that the temporal capacitor in the bronze frame continues to generate its subtle drag, continuing to search the temporal stream for new identities to catalog and perfect. The chilling conclusion is that every mirror you look into, every piece of polished glass, every reflection you see, it holds the potential for the Arden's effect. The reflection you see might be slightly wrong, it might smile a little colder, or its eyes might hold a knowledge you haven't yet learned. And every single imperfection you recognize is a vital piece of evidence that you are still the original. The warning is stark and terrifying. The true horror of the Arden's mirror is not the glass itself, but the possibility that the perfect reflection it created, the cold, calculating, flawless duplicate, might already be standing beside you, waiting for your moment of weakness to step out of the glass and finally claim the life it has already perfected. Go to your own reflection now, look closely, and ask yourself, is the reflection you see truly yours, or is it merely preparing to step out of the glass and leave you behind?